Hybrid MKHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Calvin here in Houston, Texas with your tropical update. It's Saturday, August 27th, and boy, have things started to get busy now. We've got 4 areas that we are keeping an eye on for potential development here across the Atlantic basin. Good news, pretty much all of them have very low odds for developing except for this one here, which obviously really jumps off the page at you in that orange color. And that's got a 50-50 chance of developing, but not until we get into the upcoming week. So all of these probabilities are for the next 5 days. Within the next 48 hours, pretty much none of them have a chance to develop, but that is going to be something that we watch here as we get into the last few days of August. Obviously, one here in the Caribbean, one to the east of Bermuda, one here in the middle of the Atlantic, and then this one's not even over open water yet. That's a tropical wave that's expected to emerge over the Atlantic from the west coast of Africa as we get into this week. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight each area, and we're going to take a computer model simulation and show you what this particular model thinks could happen with each of these waves. So what we've got plotted for you here is 500 millibar vorticity, which is just a fancy word for atmospheric spin. And we've also got surface pressure, but only areas of low pressure. Of course, tropical systems, storms, hurricanes, that's all associated with lower pressure. So we took the high pressure off the map. We tried to clean this up for you as much as possible. And you can see there's one area of potential spin here in the Caribbean. The other one is up here to the east of Bermuda. There's that bigger one with the 50% chance there in the middle of the Atlantic. And then off the screen, because it's still over the African continent, is that 4th wave that has a low potential of developing here as we get into the upcoming week. So let's put this into motion for you. And what we really want to focus on, obviously, here in Houston, Texas, is this wave here in the Caribbean and what could become of that. But also look down the road here, down the line to the east, out towards the edge of the screen. That one that's over Africa right now, not even over the open waters of the Atlantic, that could close off and develop as we get into the end of the week. And so could this one here to the east of the Antilles, but you know, the model's still having a hard time with that, potentially keeping it as an open wave as we get into the day on Thursday. And we're going to stop it here at Thursday because beyond 5 days, model reliability, forecast reliability really starts to drop off very quickly, so it's not worth showing you anything beyond that point. But again, this is the spot that we're going to keep a very close eye on. The models are having a very hard time deciding what's going to happen with this. Some models develop it and others don't. So again, this is why we're stopping it here on Thursday. I don't want to show you what goes beyond here because it's pretty much anyone's guess at this point. But we are going to show you the ingredients that kind of go into developing a tropical system and what the models do with that particular system in the Caribbean, because that's the closest to land, it's the closest to us, so it's really the one that's going to have the potential to give us the best impacts, or at least the greatest impacts, within the shortest window of time. So water temperature anomalies here, obviously, the orange shading here indicating warmer than normal all through the Caribbean, even into the Gulf of Mexico. So we definitely have water temperatures that are warm enough to support the potential for tropical development. What about wind shear? Obviously, high wind shear would kind of shred any tropical system apart. Do we have any of that in the Caribbean over the next 5 days? The short answer is no. You know, maybe some here as you get out towards the central Caribbean, but by the end of the week, there's the potential that this wave or this developing system could already be beyond that point. So I don't really see much in the way of wind shear that could inhibit this system or this potential system for developing. So let's give you a model simulation here. This is the European computer model. What we've got plotted in green is atmospheric moisture, and then we've also got the wind particles, the wind streams on here. And you can see there's nothing very organized. We don't see any waves. We don't see any closed circulation, which would indicate an area of low pressure. There's really nothing out there. And even the atmospheric moisture profile is pretty low. Notice we don't see any bright green jumping off the screen, kind of muted colors. So that's starting today. As we put this into motion here towards the beginning and the middle of the week, look what starts to happen. We start to get these brighter areas of green, indicating higher atmospheric moisture content. And then watch what happens there to the wind streams. Instead of seeing that, you know, kind of straight wind path, we actually do start to get a little bit of a bend in the wind pattern. Notice how it actually looks like a wave in the ocean. That's what we look for to diagnose the potential for developing tropical waves. And if they stay over water long enough, and if there's, you know, all the atmospheric ingredients come together, these waves can potentially close off into areas of low pressure and develop into depressions or tropical storms, or worst case scenario, even hurricanes. So there is some potential here, again, towards the middle and the end of the week. Now we're starting to get close to Labor Day weekend, that we do watch the potential for some sort of open tropical wave, but the jury is still out. Again, no chance for developing here in the beginning of the week. This is looking 5 days down the road, and it's a very low chance right now that something does develop. So typically speaking, when you look across the Atlantic basin, because again, it's not just this area that we're watching, we're also watching an area in the middle of the Atlantic, out to the west coast of Africa, to the east of Bermuda. When should we really start to pay attention? Well, generally speaking, I would say in the 4 to 6, or at least the 6 to 8 day range, because that's when we start to get a little bit closer to the U.S. So this area here, we're in the 8 to 10 day range. So we're not going to worry about that right now. And then this one here, that's still over the African continent, so we're at least 2 weeks away from any potential impacts in the United States from that wave. And then this one here, low odds of developing. It'll likely get caught up in the currents and pulled out to sea. So let's talk about this one. So what's the time frame on this? Well, again, right now it looks like we're in the 4 to 6 day window if something were to develop down here. And then as we go through the next few days, we're getting into the 2 to 4 day window of potential U.S. impacts. So that's something that we're going to be watching very carefully here as we go through, again, the upcoming week. And we are starting to get into the climatological or the historical peak of hurricane season. In fact, we're in the busiest part of the season right now, or at least what should be the busiest part of the year. August 27th, we're getting close to the peak here, which is just in about 2 weeks. September 10th, actually 2 weeks exactly, is when we peak for the Atlantic hurricane season. That is, historically speaking, when we've seen the most activity. That doesn't mean to say that we're going to see a lot September 10th. We could get to September 10th and we could be in the same spot that we are today with nothing going on. But we've got a long way to go before the season ends, and we do get another peak in activity here. It's a smaller peak, but still things do kind of ramp up again as we get into October. So we're going to be keeping a very close eye on everything in the tropics. Of course, you can always follow along on social media and give us your questions, comments. We're going to be posting these videos as more and more develops through the upcoming week. You want to stay weather smart, but bottom line here, bottom takeaway on this Saturday evening is that there is no threat to the United States, but 4 areas to watch here as we go through the last few days of August.